Dr. Stephan Simonian is a board-certified general and child psychiatrist. He completed medical school at Shiraz University in Shiraz, Iran. He completed general psychiatric residency training program as well as a fellowship in a child and adolescent psychiatry at New York Medical College, Metropolitan Hospital Center. Concomitant with his psychiatry and child psychiatry training, Dr. Simonian completed the New York Medical College Psychoanalytic Division didactic courses, including his own required personal psychoanalysis. In 1990, Dr. Simonian started his personal psychiatric orgone therapy with Dr. Morton Herskovitz, which Dr. Lewis just mentioned, and as having recently died and been the last student of Reich, and now there are none, and the lineage continues. He later became a member of the Institute for Organomic Science. Dr. Simonian has been practicing general and child psychiatry since 1984. He was the chief of Department of Psychiatry at Milford Regional Hospital in Milford, Mass. for several years. In 2003, he moved to Los Angeles and has been practicing general and child psychiatry as well as psychiatric orgone therapy in Glendale, California. Dr. Simonian translated the book Function of the Orgasm by Wilhelm Reich, and it is published in Persian, and it is published in both Iran and the United States. He is the editor of the Journal of Psychiatric Orgone Therapy, which is an online journal, and has written several articles in that journal.
My part of this speech is going to be how Reich developed from Freud, because Wilhelm Reich was Freud's student, and first was psychoanalyst, and gradually developed into a little diverted and developed orgonomy, which is rooted in psychoanalysis. So, and then it branches to other things, so we will quickly go over it. So orgonomy grew in the womb of psychoanalysis. The founder of psychoanalysis was Sigmund Freud. This is going to be a little bit, yeah. Sorry for this slow. Reich was a student of Freud and psychoanalyst in the Freud circle. This is Freud's picture. I think this is the picture that Freud gave to Reich as a remembrance, and is hanging in the wall of the museum, Rangeley, Maine. Freud himself inscribed it under it to Wilhelm Reich as a remembrance, and by his own signature, and it is hanged in the museum of Wilhelm Reich. Those who have not visited the Wilhelm Reich Museum, I encourage them to do. It's in Rangeley, Maine. It's a serene place, very nice, very quiet, with lakes around it, and it's marvelous vacation time, also learning experiment. This is Wilhelm Reich's museum. Now, this is Wilhelm Reich. Let me see. Yeah, this is Wilhelm Reich in the Lucerne Conference in 1934. This is a major psychoanalytic conference. The reason I'm showing this to you is to see how central his figure is, his authority. He's talking and everyone else is listening to him. So I want to convey that his knowledge in psychoanalysis, his understanding of psychoanalysis was very deep. So someone who has a deep knowledge in science can further it. But I want, so it's not that he didn't know anything and then he brings up the theory. His knowledge of psychoanalysis is deep, and this is the proof of it. Now that we know that Reich started his work from psychoanalysis, and Freud's theories, psychoanalysis is the basis of what he developed later on. I'm going to quickly go over some of the important points in psychoanalysis. Psychoanalytic theories that Freud has mentioned or set forth. Freud developed three major theories. The first theory is libido theory or economic theory. We call it economic theory because it's like economy. It can be reserved, it can be spent somewhere and saved somewhere else, it moves. So the first theory is libido theory. The second theory is topographic theory, the theory of conscious and unconscious. And the third theory of the Freud is structural theory, the theory of id, ego, superego. Now, the first libido theory. Libido theory is Freud hypothesized that there must be an energy innately in the child that grows and propagates the life, and it moves in the newborn. He, by observation of the newborn growing, he made this assumption and hypothesis. So the libido theory is a hypothetical energy that Freud hypothesized in order to explain some of the things that was happening in children. This is a hypothetical psychosexual energy that operates in newborn. It is the source of propagation of life, and instinct get their power from this energy source. And neurosis develops when this energy is blocked. I'll talk more about it later on. Now, topographic theory. Topographic theory is the theory of conscious and unconscious. So Freud assumed that under our conscious mind there is a larger section of unconscious that influences our life, that we make decisions and do things that we are unaware of why we are doing, but it has its input there and pushes us into directions that we are not aware of. Psychoneurotic symptoms are manifestation of conflict rooted in the person's unconscious. Now, I'll talk about the neurosis that Freud assumed later on. Now, Freud postulated that psychoanalytic technique, because there is an unconscious, and if there is a conflict in the unconscious, then this causes neurotic symptoms. So Freud suggested that in order to improve neurosis, we need a technique. The technique is psychoanalysis. So Freud postulated that by psychoanalytic technique, when the unconscious conflict becomes conscious, then the symptoms should improve. Now, the structural theory of the Freud is theory of id, ego, superego. Freud again hypothetically divided human psychological structure to three components. Id, which is the instinctual strivings, ego, which is the part that negotiates with the world and interacts with the world, and superego, which is the internalized social, parental, and religious values and causes approval and disapproval and creates guilt and demands punitive measures. So these are the three theories of Freud. These three theories of the Freud overlap with each other in certain points. Libido theory, topographic theory, and structural theory. There are some points that they overlap with each other. Now, Freud suggested two types of neurosis. One type of neurosis, he called it stasis neurosis or actual neurosis. This neurosis happens when the flow of libido energy is blocked because of abstinence, and that causes a toxic reaction when the psychosexual energy is accumulated and is not discharged. Then Freud assumed that it develops symptoms like hyperventilation, palpitation, like thyrotoxicosis. When thyroid hormone gets more in the blood, it causes toxic reaction. And he stated that by a little bit counseling and helping the patient not to be abstinent will help this neurosis and will cure this neurosis. He also postulated the second type of neurosis. He called it psychoneurosis, which is because of unconscious conflict, the conflict which is in the unconscious and patient is unaware of it, and it causes neurotic symptoms. However, he himself agreed that under each stasis neurosis, there is some psychoneurosis, and with some psychoneurosis there is some stasis neurosis. So basically, both contain each other. There is no reason, there is no real need for differentiation. I already said. Now, Freud's psychoanalytic technique. Now, if there is a conflict in the unconscious, which is causing neurosis, then how do we treat this? Freud, we must have a technique. The technique in the Freudian psychoanalysis is the psychoanalysis. We have a psychoanalytic technique to go into the unconscious and unearth or bring up the unconscious conflict. And by coming up the unconscious conflict, the patient should improve. Now, the psychoanalytic technique, Freud suggested that patients should lie on the couch and is encouraged to free associate, talk whatever comes to his mind. And this by free association, one idea will bring up another idea, like links of a chain. And eventually this will lead to the unconscious conflict. Of course, psychoanalyst has to a little bit coach and know and predict where is the patient going and lead the patient to that direction. Now, also he suggested dream interpretation, because in the dreams there is some element of unconscious, and if we can interpret the dream correctly, we might be able to unearth some of the unconscious issues. Dreams talk in a symbolic way and needs to be interpreted like poetry. So we have to be able to do interpretations, and that helps to go into the unconscious. So Freud postulated that when unconscious becomes conscious, the patient's neurosis should improve. This is a psychoanalytic setting. The psychoanalyst sits on the top of the couch, and this is the patient. Freud postulated that by laying position, when the patient is laid down, it is easier to free associate. The free associations come better. And it was suggested that analysts should be out of the sight of the patient in the back. However, psychoanalytic technique and making unconscious conscious does not always work. Sometimes patients, first of all, resist. They don't free associate, or they talk about things that is not relevant, and they intentionally dodge it. Or even if they reach and the unconscious material gets conscious, patient sometimes does not improve, even though unconscious has become conscious. They only get an intellectual understanding. They know why they are feeling miserable or why they have this problem. Intellectually they know, but they are still having it. So the psychoanalytic technique and theory sometimes work and sometimes doesn't. Now this is Time magazine on I think 1993 November issue. The author had a report on Freud, and the question is Freud dead? Now, why is Freud dead? The author in this article eventually concludes that psychoanalysis and all of its offshoots may in final analysis turn out to be no more reliable than countless other pseudosciences. So now, keep in mind, this is a major discovery. Freud did a major discovery. And because it is halfway done, because sometimes it doesn't render results, people have missed it. And it boils down to a pseudoscience like countless other pseudosciences. You know. So you see, Reich speaks of Freud, says Freud was a Moses that didn't reach promised land. And that's true. He didn't reach promised land because it's halfway done. here is where Reich comes. Now, Reich was student of Freud and was following Freud's suggestions, and he was analyzing the patients. So Reich realized that sometimes when the unconscious becomes conscious, patients get better. But sometimes when the unconscious gets conscious, patient does not get better. So in his mind, the question was that why? Why someone gets better once someone doesn't? So he, in the function of orgasm, gives two cases. One case, Freud referred to Reich, was a student who had an obsession and was counting a lot. He was counting numbers, everything was changing into a number. So Reich analyzed this patient like the way Freud suggested, and on the 9th month of the analysis, incest fantasy broke through, and the patient was able to have satisfactory sexual release. And after that, he had few setbacks, and again, analysis continue, and after patient gradually became capable of having healthy sexual life and married, and the symptoms disappear, and Reich says that in 6 years that had a connection with the patient, he was doing good. Concomitantly, Reich was analyzing another patient, which I'm going to read the description for the patient, that because it's important, that this is a waiter who he was analyzing. Now, he says that during the third year of psychoanalysis, he arrived at a perfect reconstruction of primal scene. He was 2 years old when this occurred. His mother gave birth to a child, and from the adjacent room, he had been able to observe every detail of the delivery. The impression of a large, bloody hole between the mother's leg became firmly ingrained in his mind. So this waiter who initially came, the major complaint was impotence. He was completely impotent. He was unable to have any type of erection. So now, on conscious level, there remained only the sensation of emptiness in his own genitals. Based on psychoanalytic knowledge of that time, I merely connected his inability to have erection to his severely traumatic impression of castrated female genitalia. This analysis was no doubt correct. At that time, I incorrectly assessed the total personality of my patient. He was very quiet, well-mannered, well-behaved person, and did everything that he was asked to do. In a course of 3 years of treatment, he never once became angry or exercised criticism. Thus, according to the prevailing thought, he was fully integrated, adjusted character with only one acute symptom, monosymptomatic neurosis. Reich presented this case to the analyst at that time, and he was praised, and they said that, oh, okay, analysis is fine. So Reich then said that, okay, if the analysis is fine, and I have done everything right, then why he is not better? Why he still has the problem? So he says that he realized that major problem was this waiter's unshakable calmness, tranquility, and agreeableness, that everyone else was thinking this is an asset, this is a good character, but real problem, real sickness was his character. So his politeness, his placidity. Reich says that after 3 years of analysis, he terminated the analysis and the patient was not improved. And the patient accepted the termination as he accepted anything else in his life, with politeness, niceness, and agreeableness. So he realized that, well, the character is what the symptom was sustained on the base of it, on the top of this character structure. So from here on, Reich moves into character analysis. He realizes that the character is the most important thing, rather than making conscious unconscious. Because even when unconscious conflicts become conscious, sometimes neurosis does not improve. So we say that Reich moved into character analysis rather than symptom analysis, because patients' whole character resist the treatment, and he says it's not important what patient says, but how he says it. So he presented this case to Freud, but Freud did not like this idea and said that no, you have to analyze whatever patient says first. But he says that it does not work, because you saw the case that he presented. So Reich developed from here on two theories, the theory of armoring and theory of orgasm. These are two main theories of Wilhelm Reich. And Dr. Herskovich once said that the theory of armoring, the discovery of armoring, is one of the most important discoveries in the psychiatry, which is unknown and unnoticed by the conventional psychiatry. Now the theory of armoring. The theory of armoring develops in the process of Reich's work with patients' resistances to treatment, as we saw in the waiter who didn't change. Reich discovered that the patient's whole character resists the process of psychoanalysis, and it resists change like aforementioned polite and agreeable waiter. It's interesting because sometimes when a patient complains about things, and when you mention his character, he becomes defensive. No, I am this, I am that. They don't want to accept their character flaw. Now, character armor is defined, same as character resistance. Character armor is defined as the sum total of character attitudes which an individual develops as a defense against emotional excitation, resulting in rigidities of the body and lack of genuine emotional contact. This movement to the character analysis starts in 1926. In 1926, Reich says that he was making presentation saying that, well, initially the character is most important too, and things should not be analyzed as patient produces. No, I started late.
15. And then question.
Okay. Anyhow, character analysis, although character analysis, although it still is in variance with psychoanalysis that Freud said, but still is in the psychoanalytic area because it starts on the words. Now, character armor has a physical counterpart. A patient who is always smiling, always nice, always develops some muscular rigidities, muscular features that then translates into physical armor. And Reich recognizes that from here on, Reich moves not only move to the character analysis, but then he's moving into body, physical analysis. Emotional armor and physical armor are counterparts of each other and functionally identical with each other. One in the realm of psyche and the other in the realm of body. Now, these things are not known in the conventional psychiatry. They don't understand this, that there is a physical component on the in psychiatric problems. Well, if we have 15 minutes, I'm not going to read this. So, an example of muscular armor, Reich gives it in the function of orgasm. A man that he was analyzing and was having a very stiff neck, which is manifestation of masculinity, and he attacked it, and eventually I think he touched the neck, and the major thing broke through. He started to have a autonomic nervous system shock, diarrhea, nervousness, etc., etc. So he says that the muscle contained all the emotions because muscle was contracted, and when it was attacked, it released the emotions which were bound over there. Then Reich described a technique to dissolve character armor and counterpart of it of physical armor. Now, if you say that character is the treatment, if you say that character has a counterpart which is a muscular counterpart, we must have a technique how to resolve this, how to dissolve it so we can get further. So these two, the technique how to go to dissolve character structure and muscular armor is given in the character analysis and function of orgasm, and also Dr. Haskovic has a book by name of Emotional Armoring that describes the technique that they use to get in. This is the book of character analysis of the Reich, one of major books, and this is a function of orgasm, which is also a very important book. And this is Emotional Armoring, a book that Dr. Herskovich wrote and describes the technique. Now, as we said, the muscular armor and the physical armor and also character armor are counterpart with each other. But in the depth, they are together. You know, they are together. So this is the identity of the psychosomatic identity, that they are both together. Now, this type of thinking is also unfamiliar in conventional psychiatry and medicine. If you open any book which talks about psychosomatic illnesses, in the first chapter or so you will see the first couple of pages, you will see that the author says, yes, psyche is in soma, so they are related, but when you read it a little bit, they lose it. They talk as if the psyche is somewhere here and soma is somewhere there, because they don't know the depth of how they are related with each other, how they are connected with each other. So chronic contraction of body tissue is mediated by vegetative autonomic nervous system, and treatment technique of physical armoring is called vegetotherapy, because the muscular contraction is in relation with vegetative nervous system, autonomic nervous system. The Reich called it vegetotherapy. Vegetotherapy means the same work as character analysis in the deeper layer of biological system, in the body. Now, the theory of armoring and theory of orgasm, we said that Reich had two theories. One is the theory of armoring, the other one is theory of orgasm. The theory of orgasm, in these two theories, at the end, become interrelated with each other. They become counterpart of each other. Dissolution of armor leads to establishment of natural orgastic potency. In the book of Function of Orgasm, Reich describes the changes in patients in whom the armor is dissolved and healthy sexuality functioning is restored. I am short of time, but I have to read this. Reich says, quite spontaneously, patients begin to experience moralistic attitude of the world around them as something alien and peculiar, no matter how tenaciously they might have defended premarital chastity, which is prevalent in the Eastern countries, Middle East and so, which might have been defended premature chastity beforehand. Now they experience this demand as grotesque. Such demands no longer had any relevance to them. They became indifferent to them. Their attitude toward their work changed. If they had previously worked mechanically, not demonstrating a real interest, now they become discriminating. The change in the sexual sphere was just as pronounced. Patients who had felt no qualms about going to prostitutes became incapable for doing so. Wives who have patiently endured living with unloving husband and that submitted to sexual act out of marital obligation, they could no longer do so and they simply refused. They had enough. Reich says that when armor is dissolved, the sexual potency is restored, people develop a character like Jesus Christ character. They become self-regulated. They did not need police to behave. Now, we said that Reich had two theories, the theory of orgasm. Dr. Harry Lewis will talk about it, but I will just mention it. The theory of orgasm corresponds with Freud's theory of neurosis. Reich says that orgastic impotence is not just one of many symptoms of neurosis, but it is the most important symptom as well as the cause of neurosis. All neurotic patients are orgastically disturbed. Now, once Reich says this, he was objected. Some psychoanalysts say that no, we have patients who are orgastically potent, they can have sex several times, but they have neurosis and neurotic symptoms. However, that potency, if you scratch the surface, that's not a real orgastic potency, because either they cannot have orgasm or they have premature ejaculation, if you analyze it a little bit further, or they must use strange fantasies to get orgasm, or after the orgastic sense they have a bad feeling, sense of disgust of themselves. So when you analyze it, you will see that this is not a genuine orgastic potency. I'm sorry, I'm a little rushing because he says that I have to talk. In orgonomy, orgastic potency is defined as person's ability to surrender to the flow of biological energy free of any inhibition or fantasy, and its capacity to discharge completely the dammed up sexual excitation through involuntary pleasurable convulsions. Orgasm theory is rich is a rich theory and encompasses concept of expansion and contraction of living protoplasm and its psychological expression of pleasure and displeasure, as well as its relation to autonomic nervous system. Now, you see how different is Reich's treatment compared to psychoanalysis. If psychoanalysis only stops on the level of psyche, this goes down to the muscles, this goes down to the nervous system, vegetative nervous system, which is so deep. So the changes that happen in the patients are very fundamental. Orgastic potency and the process of armoring, both in deeper level, are connected functions. They're both connected to autonomic nervous system, which governs the involuntary process of contraction and expansion of the body by sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous branches. Now that we recognize that this contraction, the character armor, the psychological condition causes contractions of the muscles, and in deeper level causes some disturbance in the vegetative nervous system, then it's reasonable to realize that then this contraction, chronic contraction, can cause some physical problems too. Reich called it biopathy. Reich, in the book of Cancer Biopathy, used the term biopathy for such physical conditions, and Reich says the term biopathy refers to all disease processes caused by basic dysfunction of the autonomic vegetative nervous system. Once this happens, it can develop neurosis, it can develop cancer, it can develop different types of the physical problems as well, you know. Body and psyche are related in this way as psychosomatic illness. Now, if armoring is such a bad thing, if armoring is detrimental to the health of the human being, it causes psychological problems, physical problems, etc., then why it happens? Why human animal becomes armored. Armoring happens in the process of child's interaction with his environment. This goes into the sociology that Dr. Philip Bennett will talk about. The anti-sexual and authoritarian upbringing of children, prevalent in most cultures, are the main cause of armoring. Now, this is not my word, this is Reich's word. Schematically, the process of armoring is as follows. As you see, this is the drive, and this is the word that prohibits it. The child initially throws some temper tantrums, fights against it and whatever, but eventually submits. And part of the drive breaks and then turns against it. And now, from here on, this part is not needed because the child itself does it. And here, the armoring develops. So, armoring develops here. Now, this is the process of the continuation of problems and illnesses. I have lots of patients that I'm surprised, it's interesting, says that, doctor, I hated when my parents were doing this to me, or my mother was doing it with my father, but I find myself doing the same thing to my children, because already it's armored, and armor does the function of what they were down to. So we say that from here on, sociological branch of orgonomic starts, when Dr. Philip Bennett will talk about it. The model of human psychological structure in psychoanalysis is id, ego, superego. However, in orgonomy, the model that we approach the patient is core, middle layer, and periphery. Now this is an unarmored organism that the impulses are able to show itself undistorted, and this is the armored one. As you see, there is an armor develops, that this armor prevents and distorts the basic primary impulses to secondary impulses, to secondary drives. These secondary drives then changes to sadistic drives, destructive drives, or maybe false or ingenuine pleasant drive, pleasure, politeness, etc. Now, however, that is not that simple. The armor has interlacing different forces which fight with each other. In the book Mass Psychology of Fascism, Reich says, extensive and painstaking therapeutic work on the human character has led me to conclude that as a rule, we are dealing with three different layers of biopsychic structure in the evaluation of a human reaction. These three layers of character structure are deposits of social development which function autonomously. This is the first layer and second layer. I wanted to read it, but I am afraid that I don't have time. That Reich says that in the second layer there is a rage, there is a sadism, there is, and he says that had I known it, I would pack up and run, but it's too late now. So now the biological energy that in the human organism, that Freud called it libido and Reich named it orgone, originates in the vegetative ganglion. This is assumption in the orgonomy. We assume that the energy that Freud talked about as libido, and we in Reich's circle we call it orgone, Reich named it orgone, is energy that originates in the vegetative ganglions and by pulsation propagates in the body by autonomic nervous system. And the vegetative centers are abundant in the lower abdominal area, solar plexus, hypogastric plexus, and lumbosacral plexus. This is verified or supported by one paper that was published in 1961 in Leningrad in Pavlov Institute, that the author verified that there is a pulsation independently from the hypogastric ganglions in a cat. This is the schematic depiction of it. This is the center that propagates the energy. Reich and they identified same energy, orgone energy, in the atmosphere and tried to harvest it by different devices and used it medically. From here on, biophysical branch of orgonomy develops, which Dr. Hutt-Snyder will talk about later on. Reich says, the basic theory belonged to Freud, but I furthered it so much that he himself could not recognize it anymore. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simonian. Are there any questions for Dr. Simonian about what he has just presented us?
Just go on.
Yeah. Yes. Did Reich talk about the physician being an orgone reflector to the patient? In other words, the character armor and the emotional physical armor of the physician had to be clear for the patient to be accessible.
Absolutely. He said that orgonomist or orgone therapist that one day is certified, the next day he might not be. So it depends, the organ structure of the clinician himself too. Yes, absolutely. I hear this from Dr. Herskovich. Herskovich was the student of Freud, Herskovich was a student of Reich, and was telling me sometimes what Reich has said, and that's Reich's own word.
Instead of taking questions, please just go on.
Well, gentlemen,
There may be some questions.
Okay, I'll find out
Some
later.
time at the end, surely. Any other questions? Yes.
May I my name is Psychoanalysis and I'm the author of the
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, my question is, was there any influence to the other psychoanalysts in Europe, like Michael Barry? I read about Michael Barry extensively, and he was talking about expansion and expansion.
Yeah, well, I mean, some people, I'm sure that will come to the same conclusion partly. I'm sure that the Reich affected others too, but perhaps I'm not exactly know who at the time, historically whom he affected. So I'm maybe Philip or Dr. Harry Lewis might know better about the historical issues. You might ask about them.
May I
Dr. Lewis?
if there was any indication of he studied about
Well, Reich was well informed and studied in different things. If you read the Function of Orgasm, you will see that he talks about Nietzsche, he talks about different philosophers prior to that. So I'm sure he was aware of those philosophies. That's right.
Dr. Lewis, you have a comment?
Yeah, just quickly in answer to whether others were influenced by Reich, he was central in the particularly younger generation around the inner circle of Freud. The key figures were Otto Fenichel and Annie Pink, his wife, Annie Pink Reich. She went on as Annie Reich, even though she insisted that he was crazy and hated him. She stayed as Annie Reich. He always credited Freud with, as Dr. Simonian said, with being the beginning. And actually, if you really begin to read Freud in depth, particularly the journals and notes and letters, Freud was closer to a lot of what Reich develops than a lot of people realize, including the fact that it's not very well known. Freud worked directly on the body for a period of time, particularly in the early 20s, the early 19-teens, but got very frightened of it. He says it in his notes. He got very frightened of what happened when he touched the body, and that became a no-no. Reich was at the epicenter of what was beginning to become a split in psychoanalysis.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Anybody else have questions for Dr. Simonian?
Thank you very much. We will have a